Good morning, everybody. John Fiocla here for GAI Insights with a Gen AI news briefing, rating your top news essential, important, or optional. We also have Luda with me today and Ankash. So we've got some interesting stuff. We got some product announcements as well as some new models that can help with sequencing of activities to make your reasoning that much better, as well as a couple of cost models. All right. Ankash, please start us off with the first article.
Sure, John. So the first one that we have for today comes from VentureBeat, and it talks about what does it cost to build a conversational AI.
Luda, what do you think of this one?
Well, it is a very interesting piece. Goes over all the components. If you were to create a model, a financial model of what it costs to put together a conversational AI, they go through it and then use a hypothetical example to demonstrate what it would cost. So from the perspective of outlining what needs to be considered, it's a good read. It's a short, sweet article, but it lacks a lot of detail that you would need to really do an ROI, because it's very much dependent on where you are using it and how much you will be using it and whatnot. So it's a lighter read, but I think we should highlight it as important because many leaders are wrestling with the topic of cost. How do you put it together? What are the components? And this provides the insight into that.
Yeah, I was leaning toward important as well. It's not bad. I mean, it's a short article, but lays out, the basic thing on premise versus, buying it from the cloud. What do you think here, Paul?
Yeah, I thought it was actually important as well. I think what's happening in market is that no one cared about total cost of ownership last year because everyone just wanted to get the pilot. 95% of them went to open AI and Azure. And this year they're starting to scale out, and people are starting to have more implications on what total cost of ownership is next year. And, when you start getting to 500 or a million API calls, you do need to understand it. And I think this is a very good basic way for AI leaders to start understanding that cost structure. So I had it as important.
That's great. And for our audience, we're working up a model that deals with this and some of the major vendors and so forth. Very exciting, complicated, but it's exciting. All right, Akash, we're going to put this baby as important next.
The next one that we have is from the Wall Street Journal, and it talks about how the AI products that we are seeing are just improving on existing products.
Yes, I think, when you walk in the editorial offices, although this is a quaint notion because everybody's at home, I think that there are two aisles in any publication. There's the let's promote and let's detract. And, and it just bounces between those things. Anyway, what did you think here, Luda?
Oh, I rated this article as optional. It certainly is the case that the first use cases were on the cost improvements and finding places where the leaders can experiment, quite frankly, and not expose it to the outside because of security and other issues. So it's very natural that the first wave was on the performance improvement, process optimization, which is fine. But this article doesn't add anything really to that. So I rated it as optional.
Yeah, I was coming in as optional as well. I mean, and the whole notion that, hey, this is nothing new here. We're just going to, it's another technology to help your existing stuff. It's going to make it better. And then he gives some examples of things that are actually more standalone kinds of activities. Anyway, yeah, I think to me, it was optional, totally optional, super optional, optional. Paul?
What do you think?
Agree. Let's save our time star of AI leader minutes and have them not read this.
All right, optional it is. Sankaj, next.
The next one is a research paper which talks about agent workflow memory. So memory is a big concern in large language models and how we can orchestrate agents. So this sort of tries to solve for that.
Yeah, this is a really interesting paper. I think it documents. I'm going to end up on optional just because you can't get access to it right now. But if you could get access to it, I would probably put this as essential. I'll tell you why. I had a nice conversation with the robot about how is this different than the sequencing that is now available in the new Chat GPT, right? Where it's obviously doing multiple experts and planning. And we went back and forth, and it's about the ability to inductively come up with experiences, which are basically process automation, and to put that in the work environment, and then to make the model that much more efficient as it applies this experience logic. And it's really quite powerful. And I think, given the marginal cost that's going to happen in a bunch of the production systems, that is, people are going to be really looking at cost per token, cost per interaction, as we saw in that earlier article that we just put as important. There's a lovely little calculation that says in terms of the support cost, at volume, every incremental phone call is going to cost you 16 cents. If you do it with OpenAI in the cloud, it's going to cost you 8 cents. At scale, if you're on premise with Llama. And that's a big difference, 50% difference in a factor input. And I think this is going to also head us in that direction. So optional on my way to important. If they had a downloadable thing, I'd make it essential.
I would actually rate it as important. This is a different type of memory that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
They improve. So it's not just memory of various facts that you accumulate. It's, as you said, it's process snippets. So it's a library of various pieces of agents, of workflows across the particular application or the enterprise. And then so these agents are able, or this mechanism is able to pull in real time these snippets and aid it in creating the next steps. So this is quite powerful and applied to, they showed that it actually scales and generalized across the various applications. So I actually think it's important to know, maybe not to read the whole paper, but at least understand that this is happening. So my rating would be important.
I could definitely support important. Paul?
Yeah, I'm on the other side. I still in the agent is still fascinating, interesting on the developments on the R&D lab desk, but 5% of companies are in production with Gen AI applications. They've got a long way to go to just get what they have in production, past data governance, security, ROI stuff here. And I think that we are 1 to 2 years away from any kind of company having any agent-based LLM in production. So I think it remains extremely promising on the workbench side, but not at all realistic for deployment in 2025.
Yeah, I think, Paul, I think the name is a bit misleading. It's really not about, you don't have to have agents to use this workflow, right? You can just have transactions. And so it can, so I would agree with you if it's only agentic, but it's really not, and so, I mean, it's just inductively looking at transactions and it's calling that agent behavior because it captures the behavior. I look at this as, I'm with Luda, this is like, robotic process automation on steroids, if you will. And it's got a clever, scalable memory system to catch that meta analysis and then to redeploy it into the model, management.
And then what's the benefit for the customer in production? I guess then
None.
Nothing, as they say, but important in terms of this is going to be such an important area for I think that, I mean, the way I think about it is we're creating a semantic operating system, right? And these are different components of the semantic operating system. So these folks have come up with a really important new, as far as I can tell, because I poked around a little bit, and I don't think there's anything in computer science that quite maps this. There are things that are close. That will be an optimization technique for transaction flow. And so, and I wouldn't put it even as important, but I think it's going to drive a lot of marginal cost for production systems.
So Paul, I totally agree with you that this is not into production, but an AI leader has to manage getting the stuff into production, but has to also be aware what's happening so that he can actually push the new stuff into development. And this is an optimization on development. I actually think that if he does it the the prior way, it will take him way longer. And this is a library that they've already built, right? So I think he should be aware of it, but
Right.
that's my
Sold. I don't want to.
All right. I'm feeling
Persuasive.
democratic. I'm feeling democratic this morning, so we're going for important. All right.
And John, before you go to the next article, I'd like to encourage people online to share your views as well. We'd love to see where you agree or disagree with our AI analyst.
All righty. Next, Pankaj.
The next one is from A16Z, and it talks about how every white collar role will have an AI copilot or an AI agent.
All right. We have our friends at A16Z that I would say if we had a distribution of quality of stuff coming out, it would have a lot of standard deviation. All right, Paul, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I think they have some good quality work. I didn't find anything new or interesting or novel in this one, so I had it as optional. I didn't.
Okay, this is again a robot could have done better. This person should have at least consulted a robot. For heaven's sakes, take this thing, give it to a robot, and have a much better article. So, Luda, not to prejudice your answer, but where are you on this?
I agree with you, optional, but do note at the end of the article, they put a list of various tasks that people are using, and that can be automated by AI, or can be the startups can be built on that. That's what they are after, suggesting to people, build a startup and come to us for funding. So that's a marketing article for sure, but interesting list actually.
Yeah, if you scroll down the article, Akash, you'll see a list of also by positions. I thought they at least had a couple interesting lists.
Yes, and I think it's worthy to take a look, but not for the staffed executive.
Yeah,
it's just like time staffed.
All righty, optional it is.
Also, now I just realized that's top. It could be significantly affected by AI in the next decade.
Exactly.
I've seen that in the next 12 months.
Again,
for them, it's an interesting positioning, right? Look, here's all these places that will get AI working in there. There's probably companies, there's startups. Start thinking about it and come to us. It's wise on their side.
Yeah, I mean, if you take this thing with the table and just stuff it in a robot, you have a better article. So I'm sorry.
I agree. No, that I.
So Luda, John and I were working on a proposal this weekend, and we worked pretty hard and thought we were pretty good. And before we go, we said, well, let's see what the robot has to say. And the robot came out with some really good suggestions. And John was pissed.
Yeah, I was like, hey, friggin' robot. Anyway,
well, you should have consulted the robot at the beginning, not at the end.
Well, what I started to realize is that writing, when you start really using these things, writing is more like an elaborate prompt. Like you're saying, okay, here's what I want to communicate. Now work with me on getting it into something I can actually ship. And because it's we had about 1,000 words, Paul, right, in this thing, and that's so. What's nice about writing it first is that it's just prompt engineering, right? I mean, it came back, it was way better. Hate the friggin' thing. All right, next.
Okay, the next one that we have comes from Salesforce, and it talks about its AgentForce offering. So these are about the assistants that you can use within Salesforce.
All right, Paul, now's the time to crank up your never agentic opinion.
Yeah. I mean, so Salesforce big Dreamforce conference is coming up next week here. I was on a panel on Friday with Easy Cater, who's actually good. Well, I think they're first or one of the first 2 or 3 people to actually use this for their order entry, and they're going to actually be on the keynote stage with. So I think it's an interesting case, the big benefit they told me was that they initially were automating some of the stuff themselves and ordering, and that these kind of task management agent stuff was something that was useful inside the ecosystem of a Salesforce, which they already deployed it here. So for the Salesforce users, I think this is something to be aware of. The AI leader, optional.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Paul, for me, you put your finger on the big thing, which is that, you know, when we talk about agentic behavior and, you know, whatever, to me, it's another way to think of it is you're putting a transaction into an environment, right? And that transaction you've reapportioned, you know, thinking responsibilities and policy to that agent, to that thing. Those work well, as you say, in a controlled environment. Not clear to me at all that they're going to work very well in anything but the most standardized areas, like maybe in travel and things like that, where the API is pretty standard. Because at the back end, you know, you've got an airplane or a hotel, so there's been standardization forced on that because of supplier side consolidation. You know what I mean? I mean, in terms of airlines and hotels and stuff, you look at Marriott Bonvoy, they have so many properties. And even they, I think, struggle with standardization across their properties. Anyway, so calling it an agent inside Salesforce is like, doesn't that look like a subroutine? I mean, my goodness.
Yeah. But I do think it's interesting that we have talked a lot about that unlike a lot of the other tech waves, the incumbents have a lot of power in here. They already have the data. They already have the customer relationships. Right. This is AI like a spell check going into something. The customers already has too many vendors. They want fewer vendors, and they want the benefits of AI, and they can now get it a lot of times with their existing providers. This is a good example of that.
And I think, you know, Benioff's there. He's probably jealous of the stock price of a bunch of others, and, you know, he hasn't done as well, and, you know, whatever.
I'd like to understand how many people are in that beautiful building he has downtown San Francisco. I mean, it's just this gorgeous Salesforce tower there.
Well, you know, floors, you know, 25 to 42 are for pickleball, and 42 to, you know, 57 are for morning yoga and indoor running. Anyway, all right.
But we're not cynical, Luda.
We're factual. We're not cynical.
By the way, we didn't point out the Anderson Horowitz article talked about how do you innovate around the incumbents, that was interesting. So what tax you can use to create a startup that will have sustaining power and eventually be acquired maybe by the incumbent. So this is an interesting angle to point out.
Yes, yeah, and I have a friend. I'm an advisor to a company that's doing stuff on product information, and they're having deep conversations with Salesforce because, you know, Salesforce is dying. The Salesforce, I mean, the people out selling the stuff, you know, they're dying for new stuff in their bag to increase the, you know, revenue per customer, and it's hard. I mean, they've got a big growth goal.
Yeah.
All right. Last and not least here, Microsoft's hypocrisy on AI, Akash.
So John, this one talks about how Microsoft wants to solve for climate change and also is selling its products to the oil and gas industry.
You know, there's a famous quote that I heard attributed to Winston Churchill, which is, if you're young and not liberal, don't have a heart. If you're old and not conservative, you don't have a brain. I feel like saying I have the corollary to that, which is, if you're young and not optimistic, you don't have a heart. If you're old and not cynical, you don't have a brain. Anyway. Remember, the cynics saved, you know, a lot of Romans from thinking.
We need them both, John. We need them both.
Yeah, cynics were very helpful. Anyway, what do you think here? Let's see, who do I have on this one? I think it's me. Oh yes, me. I was going to give this an optional. I mean, I think it raises some interesting issues around, hey, Microsoft, you're supposed to be, you know, planet neutral or carbon neutral, planet friendly, but you know, you're working hard. You know, there's tens of billions of dollars, almost $100 billion in potential revenue for Microsoft from the big fossil fuel companies. You know, of course they're going to serve those. I mean, anybody, you know, this person, Karen, you know, it's like, of course, you think Microsoft's not going to serve the fossil fuel industry? I mean, come on, give me a break. I think, to me, the more interesting thing is the challenge of AI, which is, as they chase AI, it is increasing their carbon footprint, and you can see it. And I think, given the fact that we're trying to do, tasks that subsets of tasks that humans know how to do, and then also creating new tasks that humans don't know how to do with these machines, and they're incredibly energy intensive compared to the human brain. It's about 10,000 times less energy efficient to do things. When you look at how much energy the human brain consumes versus these things. And so I think as we add more and more intelligence around the world, I would be surprised if the companies, if the big tech companies don't continue to increase their carbon footprint as they add intelligence. And that I think is a really interesting point, but it's kind of bounced around in the middle of, hey, these people said they were for the climate, but they actually care more about their shareholders and economic return. Newsflash. Anyway, so I put this as optional.
Yeah, and I think Microsoft's and the tech people are easy to point fingers at. If you're really serious about sustainability, you've got to start talking about cement factories in China and India and developing countries and things that really are materially impacting. I think you could eliminate every single data center in the world, and I think it's like 3% of the global energy footprint or something. So
I think it's bigger. I think it's more like 6 to 8 now. But
right.
But yeah, and hamburgers, right? Hamburgers are, the whole trope about how, whatever the left is going to take away your burgers. I mean, I think that comes from the notion that meat, especially corn-fed meat like we have, is incredibly energy inefficient. We throw out 20-25% of the food in this country in the United States, which is kind of nutty. Anyway, Luda, what do you think?
It's not only that, it creates a lot of methane, and growing beef and meat in general is a very bad for the environment, much higher than the cars and the like. I thought it was super optional because I think pointing a leader to read this stuff is not worth it. So super optional for me.
All right, super optional. We need a new category. Below the robot. That's what we'll call it. Below the robot.
Lower, but that back pocket. What's Tim's pocket?
Yes.
So it's up pocket, bottom pocket, middle pocket, no pocket for me.
No pocket.
This is nothing new. It's obvious. Microsoft is a huge company. Of course, they will go after every segment. Come on.
All right. So we have a time-saving day today. 2 importance, 4 optionals, and there we have it. Not anything essential today. Conversational, the cost of conversational agent workflow memory is something to think about. The rest, let it go. All right, Paul, I know we have a learning lab tonight.
Yes, tonight we have Liz Venzura, one of our early co-founders. She was a CMO at Buick and many other large companies, and she's been dealing a lot with advertising agencies and big brands. So she's going to share what she's seen out there. There's a tremendous amount of change going on, not only in the production of videos and marketing material, but also the discovery in brand identity because of the SEO bloodbath coming here. So join us today at 7 o'clock Eastern online for our learning lab.
Yes, and of course, like and subscribe to this channel if you want. And on the Liz's presentation tonight, remember, there's 2 rivers of cash that fund all the technology that we have. One is the river of cash that is software and hardware, software licenses, hardware purchases. But the other river of cash is advertising, and we're talking about that river of cash. All right, thanks everybody. Akash, thanks. Luda, Paul, bye-bye.